Welcome, everyone. Today, we're taking an unfiltered look at the legacy of 9/11 and how the tragic events of that day changed us. We're also going to be talking about Russia sending drones into Poland. Republicans in Congress continue to block the release of the Epstein files. Israel attacks Hamas in the Middle East and in Doha, plus a lot more coming up. This is Truth in the Barrel.
You know, what a week, Amy. And I got to tell you, if people want to keep listening to us, they're going to have to subscribe, right? You got to go to YouTube. You got to go to our social media channels. Make sure, right, you go to the new Substack for Truth in the Barrel. But following us on X, following us on Truth Social even is what people need to be doing if they want to hear all this. Because if you look at the topics you just talked about, Amy, it's going to be an incredible conversation. I don't even know, with everything that happened yesterday, with 9/11 today, with what you're seeing in our environment, Amy, I think we're in for a very dangerous and unique time over the next year going into midterms. And I think with all what you said about our foreign policy issues also, it's hard for me not to think that there hasn't been a more chaotic moment in the U.S. since 9/11,
Yeah. Well, today is 9/11, the day that we're
Right.
recording this, and it's a very somber day, and one that's very personal to both you and me,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we're going to get to that. But before we do, I think it's important to talk about what happened just yesterday in
Yeah.
Utah with the killing, the assassination of a man by the name of Charlie Kirk, who was a right wing young influencer. And sort of he was the head and founded a group called Turning Point USA, which is a right wing young sort of collegiate group that pushed a lot of conservative views. And he was shot yesterday
Yeah.
at a campus in Utah. So there's a lot going on there. And I just want to start with that.
Yeah, I mean, both of us have been in a political arena, and Amy, I know you've had death threats. Um, I've certainly had death threats and one attempt, as we've discussed on me, and I think it's you have to abhor political violence because that will break down the fabric of our society quicker than anything. And I can go into TPUSA. I don't know if you know this, Amy, but you know that Charlie had a founding partner named Bill Montgomery. Bill recruited him when he was 18 years old, told Charlie not to go to college, but to start TPUSA. Bill Montgomery was an older gentleman, had been a business consultant, things of that nature, but they wanted to push conservative values, and he thought that Charlie would be the one to do it at 18 years old. So literally took him in and groomed him for this position. So what's interesting about Bill Montgomery is, I don't know, Turning Point USA, when you're going back to 2020, Charlie Kirk was pretty virulent about the anti-COVID stance that he had, as was all of TPUSA. When you're getting into 2020, as COVID got worse, what I don't think they realized is Bill Montgomery was almost 80 years old. So Bill Montgomery ends up dying of COVID. TPUSA had to go back and discreetly start scrubbing tweets and things like that when they were talking about not wearing masks, with Charlie Kirk pushing bizarre things like hydroxychloroquine. He was deeply embedded in the conspiracy theories there. And I was looking at what happened yesterday, the tragedy of it. It's interesting that, two of the things that really they concentrated on, which was their anti-COVID stance, with one of the founders killed there, and another founder who said that, really, to summarize, that there had to be some deaths to continue with the Second Amendment in the United States. It is something, Amy, that the two founders of Turning Point USA sadly died on hills that were absolutely dangerous to actually go onto. And I think it's pretty interesting to me and tragic how Bill Montgomery died, but also how Charlie Kirk died yesterday.
It was absolutely tragic, Denver, and I didn't know any of that. I don't follow him, maybe the way that some others do. What struck me about yesterday, and I think we all kind of need to take a step back and just make sure that we are condemning violence against all members of any political faction in America. We have to condemn this type of violence. No matter what, no matter if they're like wearing a red jersey or a blue jersey, it is wrong. We should not act like this. We cannot be a nation that has any leaders that fuel these types, the flames of this. We are all threatened by this culture of violence against people who we disagree with. I'm sure that there's very little that I agreed with this man, Charlie Kirk, on. But it saddens me so much that he was killed yesterday. I mean, we are all humans. We're all humans.
Yeah, and the ripple effect, Amy, is that what political figure is safe if everybody's on the table, when it comes to violence? And that's what, concerns me. And if me or you to ever enter the arena again, it's something we have to be even more acutely aware of, right, as we're going forward. Because you see this back and forth of politically motivated killings. It's pretty devastating. I have to say this though. I absolutely abhor political violence. What happened yesterday can never happen in this country. The thing that people need to be careful about is that there is no way that I am going to pay tribute to somebody who was part of that environment. You can separate those things. And I am going to separate them. And if people don't like it, I don't care, because there's a brutality to facts. Facts are brutal. Facts are specific. And if you look at a list of what Charlie Kirk advocated for over his life, it's pretty brutal. And nobody should be part of violence. If you think about his family, it's absolutely egregious. I don't even have the correct word: traumatic, disastrous, hideous, disgusting. But you have to be careful about being part of an environment that foments dehumanization, disinformation, and hatred across wide swathes of the U.S. population. And you're seeing it right now on social media, where for some reason the far right and Russian bots and foreign disinformation propaganda specialists and groups are pushing that the Democrats are evil, and that there needs to be a war, while decrying violence at the same time. This is one of the most dangerous moments in the United States I can see, because we have sort of this mouth breathing propaganda that's baselining things that shouldn't be baselined. For instance, you can't go out and say, we decry political violence, but the Democrats are evil and they're the ones who did this. That's ludicrous. Not only is it ludicrous, it borders on the dehumanization and propaganda lines of so many evil people in the past. And I think there has to be some bravery and courage. I'm not quite sure why, if people don't have something nice to say, don't say it, Amy, but I'm not quite sure. And why Democrats would go out, or other people, while they're being totally obliterated as evil and globalists and Satanists, right? They're going out and saying that Charlie Kirk was a positive force towards any type of political rhetoric. That's simply false. So don't cede the ground of facts. You can be compassionate, you can do all these things, but never cede the ground of facts, because there's a brutality to it. And if you do, you start going down that same slope. And I think that's what worries me on both sides of this equation.
Well, what worries me is, and I know there's right-wing influencers and Russian bots and propagandists doing these heinous things right now and trying to put gas on the flames. What worries me, Denver, is when our elected leaders do that, because they,
Just
in
happened.
my opinion, have a responsibility to condemn all political violence as hurtful to Americans and hurtful to our democracy. Right now, law enforcement has not found to this taping. Law enforcement has not found the person who did this.
No.
It's easy to jump ahead with assumptions about this person's politics or motives, but the fact of the matter is we don't know. And the fact that we have members of Congress and, sadly, the President of the United States making, in my mind, very irresponsible statements about who caused this, somehow saying that Democrats caused this. It's irresponsible, and it feeds into that culture of violence. It comes back to a word that I keep coming back to over and over again right now, which is decency. Decency. Let's have the basic decency to say enough is enough. This is wrong. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. It's wrong. And you cannot be irresponsibly blaming this on the other side and then dehumanizing the other side by saying they're evil when we don't have a clue right now.
What if it was a Democrat or somebody on the far left who did it? It's still, you can't have a tit for tat numbers game where, Luigi Mangione killed, CEO of United Healthcare. Well, there was a fire set to Josh Shapiro. He was a Democrat. Well, there was 2 Democrats killed by a far-right MAGA. Well, now we have Donald Trump had an assassination attempt. By the way, that was an accelerationist. That was not any far-left ridiculousness. And then, you have all these things happening where it's this tit for tat that it's somebody else, right? But what Trump did last night on his speech was dehumanize people based on no proof. And he's fomenting dehumanization, which can lead to violence. The very thing he was saying we shouldn't do, he was doing. It was gaslighting. It shows his lack of a soul. It shows that he has real issues mentally. This is a man, right, that's doing things it's creating this environment and then going out and saying it's only one side that he wants to blame because they are really hemorrhaging right now. And the only way they think they can get into the 2026 midterms, and it's always about the midterms, is to play on this and use Charlie Kirk as a martyr. And it's horrific what happened to him, but it's horrific how they're using this. It's horrific what's going on with far-right influencers. It's horrific what's going on with Fox News. And it's horrific with people who don't see this as a politically motivated assassination. The other thing that I've had an issue with is when I put out there, I used the word assassination. I had people in the far left saying, we don't know if this is political. And my mind almost exploded. And I'm to a point that I'm almost thinking that the fringes are much bigger than we ever thought. We thought it was a 10 and 10. I think it's 30 and 30. I think they're not fringe anymore. I think hate, I think dehumanization has become normalized in our political system. And I think it's going to get worse before it gets worse. And especially in the midterms. And I'm really worried going into 28. I am absolutely concerned on a level I've never been concerned before, that as we go into 26 and to 28 in the midterms and going into the presidential election in 28, we're going to see things we didn't think were possible in the United States of America. And it's based on this leadership in this country. And that is what is happening. And there is a brutality to this. And if people aren't paying attention, they're afraid to put words to it in a way that's respectful. But there's another time where you have to get confrontational. And I think that's where we're at. We can't have political violence. But you can't say we can't have political violence. Why fomenting dehumanization that leads to political violence?
There wasn't the same outrage from our leader, our president, and on the murder, which was politically motivated, murder of the state legislator in Minnesota and her husband, the attempted murder of the other state legislator in Minnesota and his wife. They were targets of political violence. And our president said nothing. You're taking the flag down to half mast today for Charlie Kirk. You're not taking it down for the victims of 9/11. You didn't take it down for the victims of the politically motivated murder in Minnesota. It's an irresponsibility of leaders. It's one thing when far right influencers do it, or far left, as you point out, that there's fringes out there. It's another thing when leaders who are supposed to be leaders They're supposed to be calm. They're supposed to be the leaders of our country, are completely irresponsible. And the second point I'd like to make is that historically, some of these murders have these political violent acts. The people that do them, they're not always, you cannot always put them in a box. Meaning, you cannot always say, well, they're far left or they're far right. They have many times confusing ideologies, and many times they're motivated for reasons that don't match our partisan divides. And the thing about that is, if and those of you who are listening, I really learned a lot when I interviewed Bruce Hoffman and Jacob Ware, who are experts in domestic terrorism. We interviewed them on this show, Truth in the Barrel, on the Devil's Cut, just a month or so ago. And go back and listen to that, because what they taught me was that a lot of these things you can't put into a box. A lot of the people that perpetrate these, they're sort of all over the map. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them, more than you think.
Well,
and I just think that's super important.
it is super important. I think people should go listen to that. And also, right now, if you look at it, what did they've only found a footprint and a bolt action rifle that was discarded, which is, listen, for a criminal to do that and not to keep the weapon, my guess is the weapon is somehow modified where you don't know exactly where it came from. If they found it, I wonder what has happened to that rifle, if the serial numbers are available, what they've done to it. But there is no suspect. And your point is so dead on, is that until you know the facts of something, it's very important as a leader to ensure that you're giving just the facts of what's happening to that point, and not to point fingers. But even if it is somebody from the other side of the aisle, like Melissa Hortman, who was killed by a freak show wearing a mask deliberately because she was a Democrat and he was a Christian nationalist MAGA. There's a brutality to facts. For me, I mean, we're to a point right now, since we don't know who this individual is, you can't go out there and scream that it's the left, or even if it's somebody from the left, you can't do that either. You're still fomenting violence. It is such a lack of leadership, but it also means that we have an administration that can only flamethrow. And I think it goes back to the desperation starting from the Epstein files. I think they're seeing this as an opportunity. You should see what's going on here in Virginia, Amy, with the Republicans. Even people that I've known that were moderate Republicans, and this is the fear, right, Amy? They're saying online, the Democrats want to kill us. It's insane. It literally is insane. I think a lot of this has to do with their belief that this is a spiritual war and that it could become a kinetic war because of that. And I just can't believe that there's people that are saying that. It's hard for me to get my arms around it.
Well, the point is that political violence is never, ever, ever acceptable. Ever. And you have to call it out. You have to call it out if it's perpetrated by people with views that don't align with your own, and you have to call it out when it's perpetrated by people with views that do align with your own. It is unacceptable.
It is.
I worry that this is going to get worse before it gets better. But I think you and I and everybody listening, we have a responsibility, if we care about this country, to make sure that we say it is unacceptable. Okay.
I agree. It's
all right. So a lot of other news happened this week that we need to talk about, though, because it's really important. There was an attack on Poland by Russia and Russian drones. I'm afraid to use the word attack, but Russian drones did go into Polish airspace and into Poland. So, Denver, what is going on here?
They're tickling the network. What they're looking at is how air defense systems will react to when they penetrate airspace. So if you look at Rzeszów, if you look around why they closed down the Rzeszów airport, I've flown in there multiple times now. There's Patriot batteries that surround Rzeszów, right? So you're looking at Poland as a NATO country, has access to armaments, right? And they have a hell of an army. So what you're looking at when you're looking at an incursion and you say, look, you're looking at double-digit number of drones going significantly over the border. What they're looking at is how fast that air defense reaction system is. It's an intelligence gathering mission. And I have to tell you, I had an attorney contact me. I'd given a speech on Ukraine about, Amy, 6-7 months ago after my first trip to Ukraine. And I said, Poland's next, and you got to watch out for the Baltics. And I remember leaving, and there was about 50 to 70 people there, like, Denver, there's no way that Russia's even going to do anything about Poland. They would be so afraid of Article 5. I said, okay. I said, like, we're supporting them now. I said, guys, I'm telling you right now, sociopaths only feel pain. That's it, that they only feel pain. And when you have such a weak administration right now after the Alaska debacle, Putin's feeling pretty emboldened right now, but he's also desperate. There's two things happening. He's desperate and emboldened. That's why you see him hitting Kyiv so much. But this Poland incursion was simply intelligence gathering to tickle the network, dependent on how they can get through the Ukraine. They see America is on fire. We're in chaos. We have no specific foreign policy experience to deal with this. We have people like Lutnick and things like that are trying to navigate this insanity. That's what's happening. That's it. That's what happened. And we should be absolutely, this is the most important story of the week, is what's happening there.
Yeah. For all the people that said that, oh, Russia would never have attacked Ukraine if Donald Trump was in office. You have to take a step back and recognize that Russia just, maybe it wasn't an attack, but it's certainly a probe on a NATO country using armed drones.
An offensive deployment of drones into Poland.
That hasn't happened in 70 years.
Yep.
And so, that happened under this current administration, and there's probably not going to be any pushback from our current administration. I mean, that should be shocking to people. And also a lot of what's come up, at least on my side, is people asking me about, well, how come they should be shooting these things down? And I think what many people maybe not fully understand is there's a lot of drones. They're very cheap. They fly fairly low. And when you launch an F-35, which is what I understand Poland did, a bunch of F-35s, they're very expensive fighter jets. You're shooting down potentially a $5,000 drone, right? Maybe a $5,000 drone with an AIM-9X, which is what the F-35s carry.
I was thinking about that.
What is an AIM-9X? It stands for Air Intercept Missile 9, and it's a heat-seeking missile. It's very expensive. It costs a couple $1 million, at least $1 million, maybe probably closer to $2 million per missile. So you're shooting down a $5,000 drone with a $2 million missile, and they're not really optimized to shoot down drones. I mean, fighter jets are optimized to shoot down other fighter jets. And so, we're in a new world. And your analysis of, hey, the Russians are probing here is very scary.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Drone warfare has been advanced by the Ukrainians, where they shoot down drones with drones, right? I mean, if you're looking at, or they go after frontline units with things like the Baba Yaga drone, also called the vampire drones. The thing about FPVs, right, first-person view drones, is that they can be built rather cheaply, as you said. But there's the Shaheds, right? My guess is going that deep into Poland, you're looking at Shaheds.
No, those are Iranian, right?
Yep, they were originally sourced from Iran. I was looking at some of the Shaheds that were shot down and captured, and they actually had French and Chinese wiring. So what you're seeing now are the Russians are actually, and even FPV drones, they're personally building them on close to frontline areas in Russia, close to the Ukrainian border, and just shipping them over. So some are cobbling them together, but they're making millions of these, right? So you have these massive warehouses that are continually making FPV drones, and they're cheaper and cheaper, right? They're getting better and better at doing this. So it's not just a lot of people like, oh, these are a bunch of Chinese DJI drones. No, they're cobbling together different types, or they're building their own components now. So it's really interesting, right? A Ukraine drone is more expensive to build if you cobble it together instead of going out in mass buying those, say from the Chinese or other areas. On the other hand, though, they have the parts there where they can build them in Ukraine. So it's really interesting dynamic. 4 million drones, I think Ukraine built last year. I think double that for Russia. It's somewhere in there. It might be that this year. But that's what we're going through, Amy, is that we have a new type of warfare here. And if we're going to use F-35s to shoot down drones, we lose that materiel battle pretty fast. So we better get better at drone warfare like the Ukrainians and learn from them, because right now we are not as capable.
And also, I criticize the current administration quite a bit, particularly on foreign policy. People that know me know that. Um, but the criticism is really real. I mean, we are right now pulling out of exercises and support for our Eastern European allies. The United
That's a
States is
great point.
pulling out. Our Department of Defense, now called the Department of War, whatever, is now pulling out of these very important not only shows of force but training to be a deterrent to Putin. We've taken our eye off the ball here. We have a Secretary of Defense that's more concerned about, the placard on outside of his office and what it says in the Pentagon than he is about these types of things going on in Europe right now. We rolled out the red carpet. We had our military roll out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin, and now he's probing into NATO. I mean, this needs to be front page news.
Right, every second. I mean, what happened was such an abysmal failure. But what we're going to have, right, is this downstream domestic issue that's going to dominate the headlines because the far right will force it that way. And I think a lot of mainstream outlets are going to fall into that. Right now, the Ukraine-Poland thing, you're right, Eastern European aid being withdrawn as far as financial aid and materiel. And obviously the other things that are happening, which I know you want to get to, internationally, as far as bombings that have been absolutely brutal. And here we are, right, screaming performatively in some hate dehumanizing way about the others. It's incredible to me how we have failed as a country over these last 8 to 9 months.
We're not being led by strong people right now.
They believe in interdimensional beings.
Israel attacked Hamas militants in Doha just a few days ago. And that country, Qatar, is the home to the United States' largest military base in the region. It's one of the most important allies in the Middle East. Israel did this attack using fighter jets. And I think what's significant that I need to remind people about is that Hamas is terrible. There's no doubt. They were sending a negotiating team to Doha, and this was part of what Donald Trump wanted. He said that he had tried to arrange for a negotiating team so he could try to mediate. Which good on you. I mean, we need an end to this war, but it's a pattern, right? I mean, he did this. The Israelis did this just a few months ago when it came to Iran. Donald Trump tried to set up a negotiating meeting, and Israel just gives Donald Trump the big middle finger.
They did.
And strikes the negotiating team from Iran. And now they strike the negotiating team in Doha and then tell the United States afterwards. I mean, that to me, just the geopolitics of that shows how weak our president really is.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the Epstein files distractions. This is the BB indictment distractions. And the fact that he would bomb a country that houses a United States military base, Amy, and we're sitting here just sort of, okay, oh, that's awful. I've never, it's hard to define the weakness of this administration if we go back 30 years, nobody could have in any way predicted that we wouldn't have pushed Russia out of Ukraine, that we would allow Poland to be actually probed by drones, by tickling the networks for an intelligence operation plan, what they're building. We would never think, right, that we would allow Doha to be. I was just in Doha 4 months ago, by the way, coming back from the UAE, right? So I don't know how to actually get my arms around this, but it comes back to lack of talent and sycophancy. It comes back to a conspiratorial mindset and fantasy creating policy. And Amy, they're not making any decision based on facts on the ground or data. They're making decisions based on bizarre belief systems. And the cascading effect of stupid is terminal. It's terminal. And I told people when this started, I thought it would take a couple years, Amy. I honestly, we're only in September. And it's hard I know for you, Amy, as somebody who thinks logically, had an incredible military career, teaches, have done things other people can't imagine, has gone through the political system. And I know I have this background myself. And when you look at it, there's no way you can get your arms around what's happening internationally right now with us sort of sitting on our hands.
And there's still hostages in Gaza.
They said they're not going to be released now because of the bombing in Doha. Did you see that?
Netanyahu thinks, I think he thinks that there's going to be a military end to this war, and you don't need to negotiate. I mean, obviously, if you're bombing the negotiating team, you don't want to negotiate.
It's an indicator.
There's just 2 million Palestinian civilians with, no leader, and who do you negotiate with if you keep killing them all? I mean, it's a great question. I feel like we gotta
have sanity back in the office. Maybe actually have an American Congress that looks at what's happening at the top of their party and say, this is insane, instead of jumping on here and saying we should all celebrate Jesus like Charlie. What is happening? Wait, political violence is what's happening, but we're ignoring, if we can't walk and chew gum at the same time internationally, we're in deep, deep trouble. Anyway, I know I'm kicking this horse.
I mean, look, Israel attacks Doha. The Russians violate Poland's airspace, but don't worry, it's okay because we have a Department of War. We renamed it. We've sent Pete Hegseth out to an aircraft carrier to put the helmet on and look cool and talk about how important it is. I'm speechless.
We've gone from the DOD to the DOE.
The DOE. We're the DOE.
Yeah, it's just incredible. I feel like it's the Homer Simpson DOD now. It's just incredible. Gosh. Wow. Okay.
Let's get to some quick shots. All right, because there's a lot more going on, and there is actually some fun stuff coming up that I'm really excited to talk about.
I've heard.
But there's a Supreme Court ruling this past week, and it had to do with racial profiling for ICE, for the immigration stuff that's going on, these raids that are going on. And basically what happened was the Supreme Court lifted a hold that was put in place by a lower court judge that stopped ICE, from stopping and searching people on what appears to be only their race. The Supreme Court said that's A-okay. And I just wanted to know what your thoughts are on that. I mean, to me, I'm kind of like, oh, well, so it's okay to racially profile on immigration, but certainly not in higher ed now from the Supreme Court. Like, where are we at here?
I don't know if it's that subtle of a ruling, Amy. I'm having a tough time with how do you paint something that's so unsubtle that, it's okay. You know what? They look brown. Now, listen, when it comes to law enforcement, profiling is something that you have to do at certain times. It's just the way it is, right? I mean, if you're in an all-black urban area, that criminal is most likely going to be black, right? If you're in an all-white rural area and there's pedophilia happening, that's going to be a white male. So, that's just the way. This is. However, when it comes to the melting pot of America, you're not just going to go up to a black person just you think they did a crime here, or to a white person because they were in a rural area here and there was a crime committed. You're not just going to check their computer because they're white and there's porn on there, child porn. Or you're not going to just go to a black person and check their computer because there's been robberies or check their house. It's insane. And so what you're seeing right now is you're seeing an absolute sort of capitulation to ICE and DHS through the Supreme Court, because I just can't believe that you're going to stop somebody who's possibly a U.S. citizen just because of the way they look to deport them. You do get to a point where you cross the Rubicon, and you wonder what's happening. We know what's happening to our country. I'm going to stop saying I wonder what's happening to our country, right?
I do want to get to some good fun things because we have to talk about 9/11. That was so important for our lives and for America. But before we do, there are some fun things that happened this past week, and there were a couple of really cool stories, and that I'd love to give cheers to. First of all, there's a special election in Virginia 11, which is near you, and I think voters are fed up a little bit with what's going on right now in our country, and they elected a Democrat in a pretty red area, James Walkinshaw, I think, won in Virginia 11. Do you know that area? Good.
Yeah, I mean, I know the area very well. But yeah, that he was going to win that. It was, I think he was. Oh goodness, the guy's name just escaped me. Is it Spencer? The Republican running against him. Not an awful person at all. The Republican, to be honest, a very moderate guy. But there was no way a Republican was going to win that district. So,
okay, so it was a
yeah.
Okay.
I think that was Jerry Connolly's old district.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what happened there.
Well, that's good. All right. So also in New Mexico, New Mexico is now the first state to make childcare free. Starting in November, the state will have childcare reimbursement or offer childcare to families, every family in the state. I just think that's worthy of a cheer. I'm somebody who is a big proponent of childcare being affordable. So cheers to New Mexico. Okay. And then finally, and this is my favorite one, in Kentucky, here in my state, there is a nurse in Eastern Kentucky who gave CPR to a raccoon. And the story is pretty amazing. And this, I think, just shows you how wonderful healthcare providers are in my state and in our country. This woman, her name is Misty Combs. She lives in Whitesburg, which is in Eastern Kentucky. It's in Letcher County. And she found these raccoons in a dumpster. And that a couple of them ran away, apparently, but one was stuck in the bottom of a dumpster, drunk, and it was drunk on moonshine. And she saw it and said, it's probably going to die. She pulled it out by its tail. It was soaking wet and she could smell, the alcohol. And she performed CPR, stomach compressions, on this raccoon, and it came, she saved it. And the piece in there that I think is funny for this show a little bit is that it was outside of a distillery that was making infused peach moonshine. And so the raccoons were, eating I guess, fermented peaches. And that's how they got into this, shall we call it, predicament. But this nurse, Miss Combs, and her colleagues they brought the raccoon, they brought it to a veterinarian and everything, put it in a cage, and then I guess after it was finally all better, they released it back into the wild, and they named the raccoon Otis Campbell, based on the fictional town drunk in the 1960s program, Andy Griffith.
Andy Griffith. I'm with you. I thought they were going to name him Pete Hegseth.
Here I am trying to be serious, and you bring that in. Anyway, cheers to the nurses, though. To her, I just think it's an amazing story. I'm somebody that loves animals, and I just think that's fantastic. So
I want to just tell everybody here what a hero, and there is no way on earth I'm going to actually give mouth to mouth to a raccoon.
It wasn't mouth to mouth; it was CPR.
Okay, I would just like to say for the record, there's no way on earth I would give CPR to a raccoon. And here's the other thing that really bothers me. Maybe the raccoon just didn't want to go on. Maybe the raccoon was like, I'm done, right? I want to drink myself to death. I'm 21 years old. I've had 732 babies. I'm ready to go, right? And so I think maybe we got to look at I don't even know what I'm saying right now. I don't even want to keep going with this because it's going to get more ridiculous. So I apologize to everybody, but we got to worry about how raccoons think too, you know.
Well, it's my favorite story of the week, I have to say. There's a lot of bad things going on. This was fun that made me laugh, and everybody should know about it.
No, I'm gonna say something that Doug's gonna cut, and I think
Today,
yes,
Denver, is the anniversary of 9/11.
yes.
And I'd like to ask you where you were on 9/11. Where were you at that morning?
Mountain Home Air Force Base, 4458B, Vance Drive, was my house on Mountain Home, and it was mountain time. So literally was putting my uniform on when the first plane hit the towers.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Where were you, Amy?
I was in San Diego, California. I was stationed in Miramar, Marine Corps Air Station, 3-hour time difference in California. The planes hit the towers at about 6:00 in the morning or 6:30 in the morning, California time. And so I was still in my apartment, and I got a call from my sister who said, watch the news, turn on the news. And I was like, still groggy. I'm like, what? You know, I turned the news on, and right as the second plane is hitting the second tower.
Yes.
And then I get another call from the operations officer in my fighter squadron. I had literally just checked into my fighter squadron. I was only there for maybe 3 or 4 months, very junior. Okay. And, but I was in an operational squadron, and that means that I'm no longer in training. I'm in a squadron that, is ready to go. And so the operations officers called everybody, said, get in here. I lived Denver very close to the base. Okay. And so I was one of the first members of my squadron, of my fighter squadron, to get onto base that morning. There was a lot of confusion on the base, and they shut the gates down.
Us too.
So a lot of the pilots who were more senior to me, aviators and weapons officers who were more senior to me, could not get onto the base because the gates were shut. I being living close, I was one of the first ones on, so I was already on the base. And I remember being in the ready room, and they needed air crew immediately to go over to the Kayla. Kayla is the combined arms loading area. It's on the other side of the airfield. It's where you put live ammunition and live ordnance on board the aircraft. You do it on the other side, away from people, if there's anything that goes wrong. And my operations officer said, we need you to go to the Kayla immediately. We need air crews out there. We have, you need to hop in and defend Southern California. And I'm like a very junior aviator, and that I'm sure the operations officer and the commanding officer were looking around trying to find somebody other than me, because I was so junior. And they erased the names on the whiteboard that were more senior because they weren't there, and they put my name up there. And I suited up. I went over to the Kayla on the other side. And I remember clearly walking to the jet that was over there. They had towed the jets over there already and had already loaded up AIM-9s, Sidewinders, AIM-120s.
Incredible.
And I walked to that jet with live missiles loaded up. And boy, my heart just, and we were being briefed on the way to the jet in the Jeep. Like, this is your mission is to defend Los Angeles. You're going to, defend Los Angeles and San Diego and Southern California. And if there is an airliner or anything coming in that is a threat, we're going to launch you, and you're going to intercept it and do what's necessary. And boy, I got to tell you, I sat in that jet for 3 hours that morning with one engine on and one engine off.
Yep.
To save fuel. You could kick the other engine back on at any moment and run down that runway. And in my mind, it was just like, oh my gosh, what's going on, and what am I going to have to do if my country asks me to do it? And so that was my 9/11. And I remember
Yeah.
being relieved probably about 11 a.m. Pacific time. So relieved meaning somebody else came in to hop in the jet and take over because it was so just emotional, psychologically emotional, sitting
It
in that jet.
was. Yeah, I remember the first one hit, the second one hit, my wife yelled. The first one, my first actual quote when I saw the first jet, when I came down and saw the replay, I came downstairs. So it was about 6:30 Mountain Time, AM, local, and I said, "That's not a small plane." And being Air Force, right, and doing mission planning and having to learn F-15s, F-16s, B-1s, right, 15Es and Cs and things like that. I looked at my wife. I said, "There's no way that's not a small plane. How would a large plane impact that building?" 31, 30, 31.
Yeah.
And so I said, I said, "I don't know if that's a mistake. That's really interesting." My phone had not rung. When the second plane hit, my director of operations, Bull Valley, my phone rings and my wife yells. I come back into the room because I was just about to go to the squadron building, which was literally a half mile away. As you know, we lived on base. And Bull Valley goes, "Chunk, get your effing ass in here." Right. So I roll in there and it's chaos because Amy, we were the Air Expeditionary Wing. We were on 90-day, 24-hour call, immediate
Mm-hmm.
notice for any worldwide conflagration. Us and Seymour Johnson would go back and forth on 90-day rotations. And obviously we had an Air Expeditionary Wing. We had F-15Es and Cs, F-16 CJs, B-1s, and KC-135s. So, so I'm like, oh my goodness. So they're like, "Denver, what happened? Go find out." And you know how much was on the intelligence channels on 9/11, Amy? Nothing. Right.
Yeah.
So like, you need to brief the air crew. So I run in there. I'm like, "Hey, I took everything unclassified I had. I thought I did okay. I'm pretty good at it." But the commander came after me and goes, "If you don't find out more stuff, we got to know now because we're going to get the call." I said, "God," he goes, "But Denver, I know now our base was shut down like yours. We only had half the air crew. We didn't have
Yeah.
any, right? And our maintainers weren't on base and our supply guys weren't on base, right? And we're like, what is happening?" And he goes, "Denver, man." And he goes, "I know you're the intelligence officer. Will you go look at the connexes to make sure they're squared away?" I said, "To pack them?" He goes, "Yeah." So I went up and I cut off the bands. You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Open all the connexes. They hadn't been used since like 1947, it seemed like. So, so we clean out the connexes. I was packing those connexes 6 days later. I left on a C5 on September 21st, 2011 to Diego to start our bombing runs, with the first mission planning bombing run being started on October 6th. That was one of the most interesting days. At that time, CNN came on to base and they made me the spokesperson as literally a first lieutenant for intelligence, just like I was in Romania in 99. And then they did a profile. The local news did a profile of my wife while I was gone because my commander's like, "Denver, just go tell them something. Just don't tell them where we're going. Don't tell them anything. Say that we're just responding to what's happening." So I did that. And in the news, while I was gone, I didn't know this, they would visit my wife every week to see how she was doing. They did a profile on my family while I was deployed for 9/11. So, yeah, it was a life-changing event.
It was for both of us. I was deployed a few months later to Manas, the
Okay.
first Marine Corps fighter squadron, first American fighter squadron to ever land in a former Soviet Union republic, and we basically built that in Kyrgyzstan, built that base back up, and we did missions into Afghanistan from that base.
Wait,
And
Kyrgyzstan's a
so,
lot closer than Diego and Oman.
yeah, I mean, and that was early
You know,
on, and in a
yeah.
few months after 9/11, and it was such a different time. But today, you just look back, and all of the victims of that tragedy, their families, our hearts go out to them, and the first responders who were so courageous in at the Pentagon and also in New York City, the amazing Americans who took over the plane or tried to take over the plane so that it wouldn't be used as a weapon, and went down in Pennsylvania. They were heroes, and our hearts just go out to them. This is such an important, somber day. It affected so many of us for the rest of our lives and our country. You and I both deployed after that. It affected our families.
Oh,
But I just,
crazy times.
It's a day where we reflect about our country and about the freedoms that we have, and a recommitment to what our country stands for, the values that we have, that there are people here who or who are not here anymore, and we owe them, our courage, for those of us who are still living and inheriting this country of ours. We owe them that courage, in my mind.
I couldn't put it any better. I mean, that's wonderful. I mean, the way that you put it, I think what's amazing is how we came together as a country. But I feel like this country, every time there is not an external threat, I feel like when we don't have that outside threat coming at us, we seem to want to turn on ourselves and look at the other as an internal threat, regardless if it's true or not. And I think that's what you're seeing now. It's amazing, right? When you look at the strife in the U.S., I mean, our entire history, it feels like we come together at times when we really need to, but it seems like we're always identifying with one tribe or another internally, and that becomes violent inside if we don't have an outside enemy. And the only way to fix that is through facts and empathy and tolerance. But I think we're on a track where we're in fantasy, intolerance, and I would say a lack of empathy on every level. And I don't know, 9/11 was horrific, but there were those few years where the country seemed to bind together. And now it looks like this country's so fragmented, I don't know what brings it back together. So,
well, I know we can talk about these things, but we're not giving up. And 9/11 is a day where we take a look back and remember, but also we have the resolve to go forward, speak the truth, and stand for what is right. Both you and I, and folks who are listening out there today. So we're going to end our show on that. But I just, I feel like this is an important day. It's an important show. We're going to do our best going forward to live the values of our country.
We are. And that means condemning political violence, speaking facts when they're uncomfortable. And I think it also coming to this with the topics like we did today with sobriety and empathy. And I think that's what we're really good at, Amy. And I'm not trying to brag, but I think we do. But if people want to get this kind of incredible insight, I think they certainly have to subscribe. They have to make sure that they go into our YouTube and watch. They can comment. Make sure that you join us for our live programs, which I think are the best. Make sure that you sign up for all of our social media accounts, right? X, True Social, Blue Sky, down the line, and our new Substack. So I hope that everybody subscribes and listens. And Amy, thank you for doing this show with me. It was fantastic. You're the greatest. Thanks for getting this together today.
Well, thanks for everyone for listening. We'll see you next time on Truth in the Barrel.